And for more on the meeting, let's cross to Thomas Sparrow, correspondent with our partner DW in Berlin. Good evening, Thomas. What does German Chancellor Merz want to achieve with this meeting?
Essentially, that Ukrainian and European interests are also discussed at that meeting in Alaska between US President Trump and Russian President Putin, because so far there are fears here in Germany, but also in other European countries, that those key interests from Ukraine and from Europe are not considered when it comes to finding a peace solution to the war in Ukraine. Specifically, part of the discussion is about when a ceasefire should be discussed, whether a ceasefire should be before any deal or whether a deal should be agreed on, which then leads to a ceasefire. The European perspective there is specifically that a ceasefire should be the precondition before any further discussions take place. A second element, you mentioned that in your introduction, is about possible territorial exchanges. That's something that has been discussed, but that is not something that Ukraine and Ukraine's European allies want to see at the moment. They want Ukraine to be able to determine its own destiny. You mentioned that as well. And specifically, they do not want borders to be changed by force because they sense that this could be a very dangerous precedent, namely that countries like Russia could invade neighbors and then change borders by force, which, according to European leaders, and they've stressed that time and time again, would be a violation of international law.
Also, how do European leaders view the planned Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska, Thomas?
They see it as something favorable, especially when it comes to Donald Trump's efforts to stop the war in Ukraine. So the fact that there are meetings is something that is seen positively from European capitals, but the content is controversial. The content of any potential agreement or any potential discussion that has to do with what I mentioned just now, the fact that European leaders and also Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy would obviously want to be at the table when important aspects of Ukraine's future are discussed, whether it is its territorial sovereignty, whether it is a possible ceasefire. Those are just two of the main topics at the table. From a European perspective, it's not only about discussing with Putin, it's also about making sure that Europeans' security interests and Ukrainians' security interests are very important placed at the table.
Also, what are the concerns of the European leader as Trump and Putin get ready for the meeting now?
Essentially, that a deal is achieved without the Europeans, or especially without including those important elements that we've been mentioning, whether it is that swap of territories between Russia and Ukraine without even asking Ukraine in the first place, or that a deal might be agreed without necessarily having a ceasefire in place beforehand. Or European leaders would also want to increase pressure on Russia, politically, economically, militarily, but that could be something that is not necessarily discussed in Alaska. So what all this tells us is that there are different views when it comes to how to put an end to the war in Ukraine, a war that has been going on now for over 3 years.
All right, Thomas Sparrow, for joining us from Berlin and getting us a rounded perspective on this latest development. Now, as the presidents of